This one's a rough one.
Yeah.
This case out of South Africa, a young woman murdered, and then the boyfriend, suicide. It's really shaking people up.
Yeah, for good reason.
And we've got news reports, we've got social media, a lot to unpack here.
Right.
And I have to admit, even just reading through the source material, I was pretty disturbed by the details.
Yeah.
So where do we even begin? How do we even begin with something like this?
Well, I think, it's important to remember that we're dealing with a very complex tragedy here. We're trying to understand these events and the reactions that they sparked, And each source, each news report, each social media post, it kind of offers, it's just like a little glimpse into this event, like different facets of this event. And I think it's by piecing all of those together that we can maybe start to grasp, the full picture.
Okay, yeah. So let's try to do that. So the sources all mention that the victim was a 25-year-old woman. She was found on a gravel road in Mzanzi, KwaZulu-Natal, and she had multiple stab wounds.
Yeah.
And the police also found a broken knife near her body.
Mm-hmm.
That detail about the broken knife, it just speaks to a level of violence that is just chilling.
Absolutely, yeah. And the boyfriend's car was found abandoned nearby.
Right.
And there was blood on the passenger seat,
Yeah.
which adds like another layer to it, right?
Right.
It suggests that the murder might have taken place inside the vehicle.
Yeah. And then of course we have to address the confession video.
Yeah.
And the suicide. It's it's horrific.
It is.
So from the reports, we know that the boyfriend, Sbusiso Lawrence, he posted a video on Facebook confessing to the murder before he took his own life.
Right. Yeah. His body was found hanging from a tree near the murder scene. And news reports included a statement from Lawrence's father, who spoke to Newsroom Africa. And he expressed the family's just complete shock and grief, emphasizing how they couldn't sleep after the news broke. It's a really stark reminder that there are multiple families, that are shattered by this event.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's so easy to just focus on the victim and her family, but this has really deeply affected everyone involved.
Right.
And the question that keeps coming up, of course, is why? In the video, Lawrence claimed that he killed his girlfriend because she was planning to leave him after she received a payout from the road accident fund.
Yeah. And, this detail about the payout, I think raises some interesting questions about the role of, financial dependence in abusive relationships. It's a factor that I think we often overlook when we try to understand, the dynamics of these types of situations.
That's a really good point. It's like, yeah, we can't oversimplify things. And of course, social media has been buzzing with reactions to this case. One Twitter user wrote, "The Sbusiso Lawrence situation is a reminder of why I always defend women."
Yeah.
It really hits home, doesn't it? You think about the everyday struggles that women face, the dangers that they're exposed to.
Yeah, I think that comment speaks to a much, much larger conversation that we need to be having about violence against women. And this case tragically, I think, exemplifies a very deeply rooted societal issue. And it's encouraging to see people, using platforms like social media to speak out against it.
Yeah. And another tweet that I saw, this one pointed out a double standard, saying that men rarely kill their partners after being cheated on. And so it seems like there's this real need for us to kind of re-examine how we view and how we address gendered violence as a society. We need to have some tough conversations, some difficult conversations about these issues.
Absolutely. I think these social media responses, while they're fueled by raw emotion, they highlight this need for systemic change.
Yeah.
They show how deeply this issue resonates with people and how urgently it needs to be addressed.
Okay, so let's move on to the official response. So from what I understand, police spokesperson Robert Neshionda confirmed that the police are investigating the woman's death as a murder.
Right.
Lawrence's death, on the other hand, is being treated as a suicide, and it will be investigated separately through an inquest docket. Could you explain for our listener who might not be familiar with that term what that means? What is an inquest docket?
Certainly. An inquest docket is essentially it's a legal process that's used in South Africa when a cause of death is unclear or when there are suspicions of foul play. And it's a separate investigation from a murder investigation. And its purpose is to determine the circumstances surrounding the death. So in this case, the inquest will likely focus on understanding the events that led up to Lawrence's suicide, including any potential contributing factors.
Oh, okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. It's important to have a clear understanding of how these investigations work. So in addition to the police investigation, we also saw Police Minister Senzo Machunu. He condemned what he called the social media exploitation around this case. He emphasized the lasting impact of this crime on everyone involved, not just the immediate victims.
Yeah, I think he brings up a very crucial point. There's this tendency, I think, to focus on the more sensational aspects of a case like this. But it's so vital to step back and really consider the broader implications of this, right? This violence has a ripple effect. It extends far beyond just the individuals who are directly involved.
Yeah.
It impacts families, it impacts communities, and it impacts society as a whole.
Yeah. It's a really important point. And then, of course, we have the plea from Women for Change, which is an organization working to end gender-based violence. They've been very vocal about this case, urging people to stop sharing images of the murder out of respect for the victim and her family.
Yeah, they make, I think, a really crucial point about how sharing traumatic content can re-traumatize those who are affected. And it can potentially desensitize others to violence. And it's not about censorship. Right, it's about recognizing that our actions, even seemingly insignificant ones, like sharing a post, they can cause harm. We need to be more mindful of the digital footprint that we leave behind and the impact that it might have on others.
That's such an important reminder, especially in today's digital age, where information spreads like wildfire.
Absolutely, we have a responsibility to consider the consequences of our online actions, and to really prioritize empathy and respect, especially when we're engaging with sensitive content.
Right.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate details of a case, but I think as you dig deeper into these sources, you start to see how this tragedy reflects a much larger and much more troubling pattern of violence against women.
Yeah, it's not just an isolated incident. It feels like every time you open the news, there's another story about a woman being harmed or even killed.
Right.
It's overwhelming sometimes. And it really makes you wonder, what are the systemic issues that allow this kind of violence to just continue?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, and one that I don't think has a simple answer. But, one issue that really jumps out at me from these sources is this normalization of violence against women. It's so ingrained in our culture that it's often dismissed as a private matter, or even blamed on the victim.
Oh yeah. I've seen that victim blaming in the comment section.
Oh, they go
like, what was she wearing?
Right.
Or why was she out so late?
Exactly.
It's just heartbreaking to see how quickly people jump to blaming the victim instead of holding the perpetrator accountable.
Yeah, it's a very dangerous pattern, and it perpetuates the cycle of abuse by shifting the focus away from the abuser's actions. And you're right. I mean, social media can amplify these harmful narratives.
Yeah.
It makes it even harder for victims to come forward and to seek justice.
So where does that leave us? How do we break that cycle? It feels so big. It feels so ingrained. Like where do we even begin to address something like that?
It's a complex challenge, but it doesn't mean that we give up. Education is key. We need to challenge harmful gender stereotypes from a young age and teach both boys and girls about healthy relationships, about consent, and about respect.
And what about the role of law enforcement? What can they do to help prevent these tragedies from happening?
Yeah, I think we need a much more robust response from law enforcement when it comes to domestic violence. Better training for police officers, so that they can recognize the signs of abuse and respond appropriately.
Yeah.
And we need stronger legal protections for victims.
Okay. That makes sense. What about the role of social media? We've talked about some of the negative aspects of it, but can it also be a tool for positive change?
Absolutely. Social media can be an incredibly powerful platform for raising awareness about gender-based violence, for amplifying the voices of survivors, and for mobilizing support for organizations that are working to end this epidemic.
Yeah, like Women for Change, for example.
Exactly.
They're doing some really important work. I keep coming back to that confession video. the fact that it was shared so widely, it feels wrong. And I understand the argument about raising awareness, but isn't there also a case to be made for protecting the victim's dignity and preventing further harm to her loved ones?
Yeah, that's a valid point, and I think it really highlights these ethical dilemmas that we often face in the digital age.
Hmm.
How do we balance the need for transparency and for accountability with the responsibility to protect those who are affected by violence? There's no easy answer to that question, and it's a conversation that I think we as a society need to continue having.
I agree. It's a complex issue with no simple solutions. So for you listening, I think it's really important to acknowledge the weight of what we've just discussed. This case is not just a sensational news story. It's a reflection of a much deeper problem that affects all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And while we feel really overwhelming, it's crucial that we don't turn away from it.
Aw.
We need to engage with these issues. We need to educate ourselves, and we need to support those who are working to create a safer world for women.
So where do we go from here? How do we move towards a future where tragedies like this are less likely to happen? What can we as individuals do to make a difference? It's such a big question, and I imagine our listener might be, feeling a little overwhelmed right now.
Yeah, it is. It is a
Yeah.
big question, but I think it's helpful to remember that change often starts with small steps.
Mhm.
It can be as simple as having a conversation with a friend or a family member about these issues, or challenging harmful stereotypes when you encounter them,
Yeah.
or supporting organizations that are working to end gender-based violence.
Yeah.
You know, even those small actions can have a ripple effect.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to feel, powerless in the face of such a large problem, but we can all make a difference in our own way. And I guess one way to start is by educating ourselves.
Absolutely.
Really, really digging deep into these issues and try and understand the complexities.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we understand the root causes of gender-based violence, the better equipped we'll be to challenge it. And it's not just about understanding the statistics or the legal frameworks. It's also about listening to the stories of survivors,
Yeah.
amplifying their voices,
Hmm.
and creating spaces where they feel safe and supported.
As we're talking about this, I keep thinking about Lawrence's father and his statement about the family's grief.
Right.
And it's just a reminder that the impact of this tragedy extends far beyond just the immediate victims.
Mm.
We often focus on holding the perpetrator accountable,
Mm-hmm.
and rightly so. But it's also important to acknowledge the complex kind of web of factors that contribute to these situations.
Yeah, that's a really important point. We can't forget that perpetrators of violence are also part of a larger system,
Yeah.
and their actions often have ripple effects on their families and their communities.
Yeah.
It's not about excusing their behavior,
Yeah.
but it's about recognizing the need for a more holistic approach to prevention and intervention.
Yeah.
What kind of support systems were in place for Lawrence? Was there a history of violence in his family? These are all questions that are worth considering if we want to truly understand the root causes of this tragedy.
So for you listening, I think one of the key takeaways here is that this case is not just a news story. It's a reflection of a much larger issue, a systemic problem that demands our attention. We can't just shake our heads and move on. We need to engage with these uncomfortable truths and work towards creating a society where violence against women is simply not an option.
Well said. Yeah, it's a long-term goal that requires a sustained effort from all of us. It's about challenging our own biases. It's about speaking out against injustice, and it's about advocating for policies that promote equality and safety. We need to create a culture where healthy relationships are modeled and encouraged, and where violence is never seen as an acceptable solution to conflict.
And that brings us to our final thought-provoking question that we want to leave you with. This case has sparked a lot of debate about the role of social media and the sharing of sensitive content. So as you continue to explore this topic, I want you to consider this. Where do we draw the line between raising awareness and potentially causing further harm?
Yeah.
How do we balance freedom of speech with the responsibility to protect victims. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but it's one that we all have a responsibility to grapple with.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
This deep dive it's been challenging, but it's been incredibly important. We've delved into some uncomfortable truths about violence,
Yeah.
about grief, about responsibility, and our collective role in creating a safer world. And while there's still so much work to be done, I hope this conversation has given you a starting point for understanding the complexities of this issue and inspired you to take action. Remember, with even small steps can make a difference.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a heavy but necessary conversation, and we appreciate you listening.